In my time playing Souls games, I already tested quite a few of Souls-likes, and this year's release, Khazan the First Berserker, is definitely among my favorites. It has a very cool and unique art style, some incredibly fun and addictive combat, and awesome bosses. And while my overall experience with the game was mostly really positive, I still have some minor issues which I hope will be improved in the future. And if there is anything to go by with these incredible devs who have a dedicated Discord where they answer all questions you have and actively ask for feedback, I'm not really worried for the future of this franchise. However, yeah, if it wasn't obvious, today in this video I'm ranking the bosses of Khazan the First Berserker. And I'm telling you, these bosses are great. I will rate them based on my usual rating as always, as you can see on the screen right here, and I will only be counting main bosses, so no real side mission, random enemies with health bars or such. However, I will be taking refights into account if I think they improved the main game fight significantly or even a little, because why not? If you like these kinds of videos, rankings, please be sure to like and subscribe. It would help out the channel massively and I would really appreciate it. And with this intro out of the way, it's time to go berserking. Hismar the Berserk Dragon is truly everything wrong with the first Berserker Khazan bosses, and the game itself. First, I want to start with the biggest fumble in the entire game, and that would be the story. There was so much potential, so many incredibly cool and intriguing ideas, and a great cast of voice actors. For example, Morgoth's voice actor from Elden Ring, and a lot of Final Fantasy XVI characters, alongside Ben Starr, who voiced Clive Rosfield from Final Fantasy XVI, who is one of my favorite characters in fiction. So, naturally, I was insanely hyped. However, the story just really didn't do much with anyone. You meet a character and then you exchange a few lines and that's about it. Then the game basically forgets about them. It's really disheartening, truthfully, and it's such a big shame because I feel like there's so much wasted potential here. This game could have had an amazing story. And Hismar truly showcases this better than anyone else. He is a threat, or rather an event that was built up throughout the entire game, which is super major, and then you finally reach his petrified form, he comes back to life, and you get to fight one of the most lame bosses I have ever seen. And this is Hismar's biggest sin. He's not a horrible boss by any means, he's not some offensively terrible creation, he's just unbelievably boring and disappointing. And that's my main reason for distaste of this boss. Sure, he has some cool attacks, and he isn't the most miserable fight, but I was just so unbelievably underwhelmed, I just couldn't but be absolutely salty about this. I considered putting him into the bad tier, but I don't think he is that horrible. I think being in the lower parts of the mediocre tier suits this boss quite well. I know some people out there really like Hismar, and I would really want to hear why, but for me, this guy was just an insane letdown. Overall, this is just a really okay first boss. He's fun enough and teaches you the early game mechanics just well enough so you can go further. He also isn't completely lacking in challenge. On my first playthrough, he killed me a few times, so I got my satisfaction out of that. He teaches you some deflection, he teaches you that you have to dodge some grabs, and even has some nice positioning things. It's just a overall solid and decent fight, however, not more. Yetuga is just the definition of an alright fight. Aratra, on the other hand, was a boss that really needed to grow on me over time. At first, I thought this was a pretty easy but just mind-numbingly boring boss, and that's because I was playing the game wrong. I didn't utilize all my offensive tools well enough, so the fight just took an eternity. However, after learning the game and the combat, I would say that this boss is quite good even. He has a cool limb breaking mechanic, some venom on his claws that you need to dodge rather than block, and overall just a pretty solid moveset with some crazy delays on some of his burst attacks. So I do quite like this boss now. What I don't like is when he starts running away, summoning either ads or wasting a lot of time. Not a big fan of those attacks, however, it's not the worst thing ever. Some other things I want to mention in this segment of the boss, because I don't really have too much to say about the boss anymore. First, the sound design in this game is absolutely amazing. Just listen to this. The The sound effects are so crisp and clean, I love it. And second of all, this game has an arachnophobia save mode, and well, Aratra is a spider, and when you turn the save mode on, this boss turns into some amalgamation of stones and it just looks so silly. I love it. It's wonderful. It was such a funny moment seeing this, and god, it was so funny. I love it. But yeah, I would say this boss is pretty good overall. Has a pretty fun moveset and is quite fun to replay. Shaktuka is a boss I imagine when someone mentions the terms beast fight, and in that regard it's quite a good one. His moveset is animated beautifully, it really feels like you're fighting a very cool looking and awesome beast, and it really captures this feeling like you're fighting a caged tiger that wants to rip you apart. He has some great moves, some swipes, some lunge attacks, and even some positioning based punishes, which are all really fun and add to this boss's fight. However, one thing that always really stood out to me about this boss that was kinda weird is, this is the pivotal moment in the story where you find out your friend Ozma is the one who actually betrayed you, and it never really just sat with me right. It just feels so unbelievably random, and I feel like they should have been revealed at a different boss. However, well, as I said, the story in this game is not executed very well. But yeah, aside from that, Shaktuka is a really enjoyable and fun fight. However, I don't really have too much to say about him. He's just quite good. Elamane is a boss that breaks my heart. However, I don't think it's for the intended reasons. This is a boss where I finally can talk a bit more in detail. I will start off the segment with criticizing the story even more here. I think Elamane is probably one of the most wasted characters in the entire game. I absolutely understand what they were going for with her. She was kind of a love interest or companion of Khazan, and I guess killing her off in this bleak story makes sense. However, I think it was done both clumsily and way too early. We just didn't have enough time to build a impactful bond with her, and the way she was killed off was just insanely lame. At some point in the story she just got abducted and then corrupted, and after that you fight her and then she dies. It's really lame, and it's such a shame because first off, the fight is quite good, but more about this later, and second of all, this concept of her being corrupted with her awesome music playing, and maybe if we get her back and she somehow dies later or doesn't die, I think she could be a great character. However, sadly this is the end of her story arc. But now let's talk about the fight, which I personally think is quite good. And this is where we come to my favorite refight in Khazan, and that is Elamane's refight. Way later in the game, you get to refight Elamane with the added ability to teleport around. And while this has been done before in the game, I think it does the most for Elamane specifically. It just allows her to break out of stun combos, which the base version is quite susceptible to. And in general, the refight version just seems way more aggressive with a way better flow. That's why I think that the refight version might even scratch the grade tier. However, I'm not as fond of the base version. It's either you stun lock combo her or she just turtles behind her shield, and the back and forth part is kind of missing. I know that this boss is kind of going for a positioning fight where you try to get behind her to stun her, but I don't know, it's not that fun in my opinion. However, I think if the story was better and she was a fight with actual stakes I would care about during the story, plus if you would fight the refight version in the main mission, I think this would maybe be a great tier fight. However, with the few issues I have, I think somewhere in the middle of the good tier is a fine spot for her. Volbino is yet another pretty fun and pretty good early game boss in Khazan. He's overall a pretty standard middle-sized foe, however I think there are two standout mechanics that make me appreciate him quite a bit. First off, he is the boss to start the trend with the elemental damage on some of hits, and thereby introducing the hybrid nature of Khazan's combat. Some moves are better dodged and some are just better deflected. And I think Volbino does a fantastic job of teaching these, and he's placed just at the right time where it becomes very useful. So I think that's a fantastic thing and a very great feature. Another thing I really like is his arena. He has two completely flat spaces where nothing gets in your way, and at some point he smashes the entire floor, burning with fire, forcing you to climb the ladder and change elevation. I think that's really awesome and memorable, and I do quite enjoy it. What I don't really love are the massive area denials in phase 3, but maybe I'm doing something wrong, so I'm not sure. Besides that, his moveset is very fun to deflect and dodge. He has a pretty cool design, and he also has a pretty good soundtrack. I think especially the guitar parts go really hard. But yeah, that's about it. Volbino, pretty damn good. Rankus is a boss I was not too fond of when I first fought him, however over time he really grew on me. I really got to appreciate his uses of AoE, his pretty awesome mobility, and even his projectiles, even though I think they do a little bit too much damage. In some aspects he reminds me of a fantastic Team Ninja boss Lu Bu from Wulong, and that's of course a very good boss to be reminded of. I think Rankus is overall really fun, deflecting him is really awesome, maybe it's satisfying deflecting this massive bludgeon weapon that also can turn into a crossbow or a flamethrower depending what Rankus feels like. The visuals of this fight are honestly quite cool and I really like his creative use of his entire toolkit. However, story-wise once again, and I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record, this is quite disappointing. Killing off Pavel, who seems to be a very important character, just unceremoniously, just didn't really sit right with me. But well, that's what the game decided. Aside from that, he's just a pretty good boss and I think at the top of the good tier is just the right place for this fella. There is not too much otherwise to praise. I think he's really fun. And the best thing about him is that he was the boss that initially made me nearly rage quit the game, and now I think he's really fun. So yeah, I've really come a long way with Khazan and its combat. It's a great game, love it so much. Troka is the first entry from the anime girl mage bosses you fight in the second half of Khazan, and she's a pretty great one, but oh my god, she absolutely destroyed me. I don't know what it is about this boss, but she just messed me up big time. It was a slaughter, especially in New Game Plus. This boss took me quite a while. However, that also made me appreciate her quite a bit. I honestly don't think she's that complex, but I think she's overall just a really hard boss to execute. A big example of that would be the delayed melee of projectiles. Like, seeing the attack is not super complex, but executing it with the correct timing just feels super difficult for me for some reason. What I really like about this boss, however, is the quite rich nature of different mechanics that are all really fun to interact with. I really love the range that you have to interrupt by throwing a javelin at her or meleeing her if you're close enough. I enjoy the mix of deflecting and dodging once again, and I also really like that as the fight goes on, she adds more and more burst counters as finishers to her combos. All that is really neat stuff. However, what I really like is her special move. This move demands a very specific way to dodge it. There are two ways I found to do it consistently. One is to dodge the first projectile, then running and dodging the second projectile. And you have to do this twice. And after that, she sends out a shit ton of little projectiles you have to avoid, and ending with a red burst counter. It's a really fun move to master, and doing the move though damage was just really rewarding. On my first playthrough, I was completely lost and didn't know what to do, so I just dodged zigzag and it kind of worked, so nice. But yeah, overall Troka is pretty great, but man, she was a bit frustrating as well. Learning her just felt quite difficult for me. Mechanically, I will definitely say I prefer the entry before Troka to Elena, because I just thought while Troka was quite frustrating to learn at times, her mechanics at least made sense and were learnable. While for Elena, there are some mechanics I really love, like the magic projectiles in phase 2 and especially her special move where you need to position yourself to avoid all the damage. Those are great, however I think her rapier moveset is just barely readable and I had a lot of issues. It just felt like I have to guess the perfect timing, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of those. They're not like fight ruining for me, but it's definitely a flaw with the boss. However, what makes me prefer Elena is just the awesome presentation. I think Elena has one of the best presentations in Khazan for sure. It's just amazing. The moment she enters phase 2 and starts flying around, summoning the theater audience, the music in the fight, the sound design for her attacks, it's all so great and I love it. I also really love her music, and I have to talk about it now. Khazan levels in general are honestly quite fun for me because fighting the enemies is fun, but the only mission I would genuinely call great and place in the A tier is Elena's. The entire vibe of the theater was just awesome and I really enjoyed my journey to reach her. So yeah, Elena's whole package is probably a tiny bit better than Troka for me. However, mechanically she's definitely not above Troka, so I can easily see these two being swappable. Morgoth the Edgelord, aka the Blade Phantom, is definitely one of the best early game bosses I've ever fought, especially in the Souls-like genre. He is very good at teaching you the early game mechanics and really asks you to lock in before you fight a very hard skill check in just about an hour. However, I think not only is his moveset quite great, I also quite enjoy his presentation interaction. He really was the thing that got me into this awesome game. He demands quite precise deflection from you, introducing it to you with an array of weapons from his big arsenal, just like Morgoth Morgoth, he's able to conjure weapons, which is quite a funny coincidence if you ask me. But not only is there some dodging, there are also some mix-ups, some AoEs you need to run out of, and also introducing the burst attacks. It's a pretty perfect early game fight for this game especially, and I really do praise him a lot. Besides that, once again, I do really wish this guy was utilized more for the story purpose. It was really intriguing at the start, but it never really went anywhere. But I have to say, there is some really funny and weird comedic timing with him, and especially missions like the Lacrima one, where he goes la 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 Lacrima. It's just absolutely funny. I love this guy, and I really wish there was more to him story-wise, but as an early game boss, he is pretty much perfect. He's great. Viper is the definition of an aura farmer for me. His aura is just so awesome, and I absolutely love this fight. His presentation alone makes him one of my favorite bosses in the game. But not only is the presentation one of the coolest, his moveset is also quite fun, and especially a very hard challenge in the early game. I was genuinely shocked to find out that this already pretty hard phase 1 has a completely second health bar, and it felt quite daunting. However, after practicing him a bit, you slowly get the hang of it, and you can eventually defeat this skill check. It's really fun and not too hard once you get the hang of it, but it's really good nonetheless. But yeah, my favorite aspect is the presentation. This Dragonkin guy, who apparently worships Hismar or something, is able to conjure a little bit of Hismar's power for his own use in phase 2, and it's just so cool. The cutscene is awesome, the music is awesome, but also the absence of music when it cuts out and it's just his sound effects and glowing eyes chasing you in the darkness. It's really cool. I absolutely love this boss overall. I also love his music, and it's quite great. However, I think mechanically he still could be a little bit more complex, which he does need to be because he's an early game boss, but that's the reason why he's not even higher. Frieren is probably overall my favorite mage boss, with one exception, but that boss is not completely a mage, so if we're talking just pure mage bosses, Balerion is definitely my favorite mage boss in the game. I think this boss is the closest we've got to an amazing tier boss that's just not quite there. There are so many awesome uses of the spell, combining stuff from other bosses and also using summons. It's basically like a Renala, and yes, I didn't confuse the names. Oh my god, these two names are just so bad, I need to shit on them again. But yeah, it's basically a better version of Renala. The summons help the fight in more ways than it does for Renala, and her spell arsenal is actually great. She still is a kind of a hybrid with some of the melees, but the spells are absolutely the main focus. Her shield forces you to be aggressive to interrupt it if possible, and if not, you need to put on pressure to break it. What I first really loved was her summoning the Reaper, but first of all, it got reused, and second of all, while the Reaper is cool at first, he kind of gets a bit boring, and you don't make any progress while hitting the Reaper, which I don't think really fits the fight. And I think especially the final part of the fight gets insanely cluttered, not in a bad way, but I feel like her moveset is a bit too complex for summoning like 6 enemies, but that's just my little complaint. Overall, really love this boss. I think the music is absolutely stellar, and it's a great fight in the game. This is, however, one of the characters that just gets introduced, talks to you like twice, and that's it. Puzzling for sure, but it's still a very great boss nonetheless. Scalpel is an insanely cool and unique boss in the first Berserker Khazan, and I really love him. He truly feels way different from every other boss in the game, and kind of in a weird way reminds me of Midra, even though they really don't have much in common at all. I just think it's insanely cool how he uses his coffin as a weapon. It's super badass, deflecting him is really fun, and his movement animations are super unique, some of the best in the game. After fighting him for a little bit, he will jump on his coffin and start a massive AoE rampage charge at you that you can interrupt for good damage and stun. However, if you don't interrupt him and let him finish this, he will gain a cool new phase with some new moves. The problem with that, however, is that it's super unintuitive that you even have to hit the coffin to knock him off, and if you do, you miss out on this cool phase. However, if you actually let him enter this phase, he will heal a pretty big chunk of his health back, so there's never really an incentive to go for it, which is the biggest flaw with the fight and the reason he's not even higher. However, besides that, I absolutely love the atmosphere with the music in this fight. His visuals and animations are truly top tier, and fighting him is insanely fun. My favorite aspect about this boss, however, is the phase 2. After you kill Scalpel, you get one of the most evil fake outs I've ever seen in the game. It's on par with Guardian Ape, however, I wasn't spoiled for this, unlike Guardian Ape, and it was an incredible experience. It was just so fun to see that he actually got up, and now you enter a last stand phase. You can hit him to deal damage to him, however the most damage comes from draining it automatically. You just have to survive. The main focus in this phase is survival, and it's just super stressful, super intense, but super fun. Absolutely love Scalpel, he's very good, but I think there's one more boss in the great tier that I would just put a tiny bit higher because he's just super solid. I was really on the fence if I would put Maluka in A or S. I just wasn't sure because on one hand he is a really amazing boss with a crazy mid-game skill check, some awesome to deflect combos and attacks, and just some awesome presentation and a nice interaction to chaos. There's a lot of going for this boss. However, I just don't think he's quite up there in S. He is really great and I do really like him, but I wouldn't say he's like amazing overall. He's just really great. That's why I decided to put him into the high A tier. He is very good, but I just think there could be a few things improved. But yeah, he's the mid-game skill check, basically the second wiper for me. He took me even longer than him and he absolutely destroyed me. He has two movesets, but he starts off in his phase 1 only using the two great swords, and on my first run I found a nice way of mixing dodging and deflecting to get a really effective use out of it and kill him easily. It was very fun to get better at this phase, however the real fight begins in phase 2 when he started using his chaos moveset. The katana moveset is absolutely great. The deflect combos are super fun, and deflecting his unsheathed attacks are some of the most satisfying things I've ever done in a game. The sound design once again being top tier, but it also just feels so good. His combos are pretty erratic and dangerous, and he can kill you quite easily, but it's so fun. Some of the timings are straight up just diabolical, like I can't deflect some of this consistently at all, but it's so fun. At some point he switches back to the two great swords and it's still very fun, but not as fun as the katana moveset. But yeah, overall this is just a ridiculously fun fight and I really love it, but it's not quite amazing tier. I also do think his design is very awesome, especially phase 2, and the music in phase 3 is also quite good, especially in that one part. Maluka, great stuff. However, I think there are two amazing tier bosses in this game and they will be shown next. Reese is the first S tier I have in this game, and I think it's very well deserved. This fight is great. However, before that, I have to come to my very repetitive ramblings about how much the story fumbled. And yes, this frustrates me to no end, as you maybe realize in this video. I think, however, Reese was one of the better done stories. As you enter this mission, you get a glimpse into the past, where you see Reese being happy, and this entire mission feels just really somber, with a version of her track being remixed as the area theme. It's really great. I did enjoy it, and I think the cutscenes in their fight, they actually kind of sold me on the stakes. Yeah, I think Reese should have been focused on way more in this game, as pretty much every character, but I think for how the game treated its characters, I think Reese one of the best cases. So I was kind of engaging with the story in this part, and yeah, it felt like it had stakes and it felt great. That's why I wish more bosses were like this. But yeah, not only that, the visuals in this fight are amazing, and the music is genuinely one of the best I have ever heard in a Souls-like. Especially Bride of Despair 2, which plays in phase 2, is incredible, but phase 1 is also just as amazing. It's this very sad and tragic track, basically depicting a tragedy, and phase 2 is just this corrupted dark version of it, with the phase 1 eventually coming back and clashing with it. It's amazing and just an amazing composition. Just 10 out of 10, chef's kiss. But that's not the only reason why I think Reese is absolutely amazing. I also think her moveset is quite great. Phase 1, her mage phase is pretty solid, pretty good, I like it. Introduces some mechanics for phase 2 as well, but let's be real, the real hype stuff is phase 2. The way she attacks with her scythe just feels so good to deflect or reflect counter. The projectiles in this phase, the way you can knock them back is absolutely amazing, and the way she attacks with a scythe, disappears and reappears is some cinema shit too. I wish this boss started doing the cool stuff she does in the final phase way earlier in this phase, but overall I still think this is one of the most fun fights in the game. Definitely my second favorite. It's truly amazing in a lot of ways. I can understand not having this boss in the amazing tier if you have some shortcomings, but to me this was just a very awesome experience, and especially on replay I grew to really love this boss. But I think there is one boss who's pretty much undeniable number one for like everyone, and that is the next entry. I genuinely don't think there has ever been an easier pick for the number 1 spot in a ranking than in this ranking of Khazan's bosses. And of course, my number 1 spot goes to no other than Ozma, the final boss of the game. Not only is Ozma the best boss in Khazan by far and ahead of the competition in every single way, he's also genuinely one of the greatest bosses I've ever fought in my life and definitely a strong contender for my top 10 bosses of all time. He is that incredible. Of course, as in fashion for Khazan, the story once again leaves a lot to be desired. There is a lot of potential. I really like the voice actor, but the story just really falls flat once again. It really doesn't deliver on the potential there is, which is a shame. But this is my final rant for the story because I'm finally done with it. Everything else about this boss, however, is absolute perfection. The presentation is one of the greatest in the game and in general I've seen in a Souls-like. The visuals are just incredible. It wonderfully delivers on what a final boss should be. The soundtrack is also fantastic, using an electric guitar in phase 2. Just lovely stuff. And before Adele from Night Rain, I think this was like one of the only electrical guitar uses in a Souls related soundtrack ever, which was super unique and well, still is. Everything about Ozma is just top tier. However, the absolutely best thing about him is of course his moveset. Jesus Christ, it's massive and great. First off, this boss is difficult as fuck. This boss took me so long, I think it was around 3 hours or something, nearly as long as like Millennia on my first playthrough, let that sink in. That's how hard I find this boss. It was a thoroughly enjoyable ride. Phase 1 starts off as a mage melee hybrid and oh my god, what a great caster phase. So good. This is already a contender for one of the best phases in the game, definitely like a top 2 or 3. He uses so many AoEs, area denials and some melee swings to mix in and create some very interesting and intricate attacks to dodge. It's super fun already. However, after he ascends to the sky and turns into his demon form or whatever, the real moveset truly begins. He uses air slashes, wind gusts, melees, his massive claws, everything to crush you. He has insane AoEs. It's just insanity. Around like a third into the second health bar, he flies up and does like a massive you have to avoid the boss's onslaught attack. A bit similar to Elder Nightiba from Stellar Blade, if I may say so. But I would say this one is even more fun to deflect or dodge. Phase 2 alone is like probably the hardest part of the fight. However, I surely believed after this difficulty spike, surely they won't mess me up. However, if you do the true ending, Ozma, believe it or not, will actually have a third phase. And this is probably the best phase in the game. He uses everything from phase 2 but mixes it even crazier and enhances it, and it's just fantastic. It's so good. It's probably one of the best phases of all time. The only flaw with this phase, however, is that it unfortunately got more gutted. It's super squishy because after like breaking his stance twice or 3 times, you empty his entire chaos bar and then he's done. It's a wonderful fun ride full of super intense moments. However, it's pretty damn short and I would like this phase to have a little more HP. However, besides that, I think I consider this boss pretty much flawless. I think Ozma is that type of boss that is worth playing the game for. Yeah, he's that good. If you are unsure about Khazan, let me tell you this: if the game is on sale and you're a big mechanics enthusiast, you get a, in my opinion, very good game with a lot of good and great bosses. However, Ozma is the tastiest and best cherry on the top you could ask for. He's just fantastic. Well, that was the Khazan video. I finally managed to finish it. I know I'm super late to the Khazan hype train or the Khazan party, and this game is not as big as it should be because in my opinion it's a great game. However, I still hope you enjoyed this ranking and watched it, and if you did, thank you so much. Helps out the channel massively. It's a very great game. I liked it a lot, as you maybe can see. Sure, I definitely have some issues, especially the story, which just left me disappointed, but overall I really liked it and I would recommend it. The combat system is fantastic, the boss roster is great, and the music also has some insane bangers. The areas overall are quite solid and I wouldn't say I really hated any of them. It's just an overall very good game. So now please let me know in the comments what you think about Khazan bosses. Do you like them? Do you think they're fantastic? Do you like them as much as I do? Or do you think some of them are way worse and deserve a worse ranking? But yeah, with that, in the next video we're diving into round 8's new expansion, Lies of P Overture, and rank the bosses there. So I hope I will see you there. And with that said, thank you once again so much for watching and see you.